Maria wiped her hands on her apron, the scent of garlic and fresh herbs clinging to her skin. It was another busy evening at Cielo, the upscale Italian restaurant in the heart of New York City where she worked as a waitress. Her shift had been long, the tips were small, and the only thing on her mind was getting through the night. Maria had come to America for a better life, but sometimes it felt like she was working harder than ever without any real hope of progress. As she made her way to the back alley to take out the trash, she noticed an elderly woman sitting alone on the sidewalk. The woman's clothes were ragged, her face weathered by time and the streets. Maria hesitated for a moment, but couldn't ignore the loneliness in the woman's eyes. "Are you all right?" Maria asked, kneeling down to her level. The woman looked up, a faint smile forming on her lips. "I'm fine, dear," she replied with a raspy voice. "Just tired, but thank you for asking." Maria didn't have much to give, but she reached into her pocket and handed the woman some spare change. The woman's eyes lit up, but she said something that Maria couldn't shake off. "You have a kind heart. Remember that, young one. You'll see how far kindness can take you." But what Maria didn't know was that the woman sitting on the sidewalk wasn't just any stranger. She was Evelyn Ford, the CEO of Ford Enterprises, one of the largest tech companies in the country. What would you do if you were Maria? Like, comment, and subscribe to follow this life-changing journey. Maria Alvarez had always been a dreamer. Born in a small village in Mexico, she had grown up with little but a big heart and a desire for something more. Her parents had worked tirelessly, scraping together a living from their small farm, doing everything they could to provide for Maria and her younger brother. They always told her that education was the key to a better future, but in their small town, opportunities were scarce. When Maria turned 18, she made the difficult decision to leave home and come to America. The promise of a better life, of a job that could give her the opportunity to send money back home, was too strong to resist. Her journey had been far from easy. She arrived in New York with only a few $100s in her pocket and a job waiting for her in a restaurant. She didn't know what to expect, but she was determined to make it work. Cielo had been Maria's first job in the city. It wasn't much, just a bustling Italian restaurant that catered to wealthy clientele, but it was enough. She worked long hours, often late into the night, wearing the same tired uniform day after day. Her dreams of moving up in the world seemed as distant as the horizon she had left behind, but Maria refused to give up. She knew the work would be tough, but she had always been a hard worker, and she believed one day her dedication would pay off. Her coworkers were kind but distant. The world of fine dining was far removed from her own, and the staff at Cielo, much like the wealthy patrons they served, didn't understand her background. The language barrier, though less of an issue now that Maria spoke fluent English, still made her feel like an outsider at times. The upscale customers who came in for fine wine and pasta didn't seem to notice her, other than when they needed something refilled or served. She was just another face among dozens of other waitstaff. But Maria didn't mind. She understood the game. She knew her place. Her life was routine. Each day, she woke up in the small apartment she shared with two other women from her hometown. They worked different jobs, but always looked out for one another. Her life was simple: work, eat, sleep, repeat. Her dreams of building something more for herself and her family back home always stayed in the back of her mind, a quiet hope that motivated her through each exhausting day. Maria's days were filled with hard work, but her nights were different. When she was off duty, she would often go to the park by herself, sitting under the towering skyscrapers and looking up at the stars. She missed Mexico, missed the wide open sky and the familiarity of home. But in the city, she felt like she was chasing something that wasn't just about money, but about the possibility of making something of herself. Her routine was interrupted that evening when she saw the elderly woman sitting alone by the restaurant's back entrance. Maria had just finished her shift and was about to head home when she spotted the frail figure on the ground. The woman looked out of place in the sleek, modern neighborhood. Her clothes were dirty, her hair matted, and her face looked as if it had seen too much. But there was a quiet dignity about her that caught Maria's attention. Maria had seen plenty of homeless people around the city, but something about this woman felt different. Perhaps it was the way she had looked up at Maria when she approached, or maybe it was just the way her eyes had pierced through the haze of the city, seeing something beyond the usual day-to-day struggle. She had always been raised to be kind, to give to others when they needed help, even if it was something small. Maria reached into her pocket and took out a few dollars. It wasn't much, but it was all she had on her. She walked over to the woman and offered it to her with a soft smile. "Here, I don't have much, but I hope this can help," Maria said quietly, her voice tinged with concern. The woman smiled faintly, her eyes crinkling at the edges. She reached out, but instead of taking the money, she took Maria's hand gently. "You have a kind heart, young one," the woman said, her voice low but filled with a strange warmth. "You'll see how far kindness will take you. You meant for something more than this." The woman's words weren't harsh, but they held a quiet certainty that made Maria pause. Maria blinked, unsure of what to say. "Thank you," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She stood there for a moment, looking at the woman, trying to understand the meaning behind her words. She didn't have time to think about it too long, though, as her shift had ended, and she had to leave. The woman's gaze followed her for a few moments before Maria turned to go. That night, Maria couldn't help but think about the woman's words. "You meant for something more." The phrase lingered in her mind, a quiet echo that wouldn't fade. What did she mean? Was Maria really meant for something more than this life in the restaurant? Or was it just a random encounter, one of the many fleeting moments that came and went in New York? She didn't have the answers, but one thing was certain: she couldn't forget the woman's eyes, the way they seemed to see something in her, something that Maria herself hadn't fully recognized yet. As the weeks went by, Maria returned to her usual routine. The memory of that night, however, never left her. She tried to push it aside, but it kept coming back in small moments. She couldn't shake the idea that she might be meant for more. She began to wonder if there was more to life than working as a waitress, spending her days serving food to people who didn't understand her struggles. Could she really build a future here in this city? One morning, as she walked to work, her phone buzzed with a new message. It was from one of the other waiters at Cielo, inviting her to join a new networking group for young professionals in the city. Maria hesitated. Networking had never been her thing, but there was something about the idea that sparked a feeling in her, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, this was the opportunity she had been waiting for. Her thumb hovered over the accept button. Could she make a change? Could she step into something new, something bigger? Maria had never imagined herself stepping outside of her comfort zone. Working as a waitress at Cielo was just supposed to be temporary. She had come to New York to build a life, but she had never expected it to be easy. The weight of the city, the fast-paced lifestyle, the unspoken rules, and the constant competition had kept her grounded in the same routine day after day. Yet, when Maria clicked accept on the message for the young professional networking group, she felt a small wave of excitement. Maybe this was the first step in finding something more than just a job. Maybe it was the first step in figuring out where her future truly lay. The first meeting of the group was in a sleek cafe in Soho, a neighborhood she had only ever passed through on her way to work. As she entered the cafe, Maria felt out of place. The white walls, the polished wooden floors, the conversations full of buzzwords and jargon, this was not her world. But it was a world she wanted to be a part of. She quickly grabbed a coffee and settled in the back corner of the room, listening as people introduced themselves, talking about their jobs in marketing, finance, tech. Maria felt herself shrinking back. She didn't belong here. "What do you do, Maria?" A voice interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to find a young woman in a sharp suit standing in front of her. Her name was Kate, and she was a finance analyst at a well-known investment firm in the city. She smiled warmly, her confidence radiating. Maria hesitated, unsure of how to respond. She had never had to explain her life this way, not in this world. I work at a restaurant." "Waitress at Cielo," Maria said, her voice faltering. It didn't sound impressive. She saw Kate's smile waver for a moment, but then it returned, though Maria could sense it was tinged with slight judgment. "That's cool," Kate replied, though Maria could tell she wasn't truly interested. The conversation quickly shifted to others around the room. Maria felt invisible again, just like she had before she clicked that accept button. But she didn't give up. She listened carefully, picked up the little things people said about their jobs, their ambitions, the kinds of things that made them feel important. That night, after the meeting, she sat on the subway back to her apartment, thinking about everything she had heard. The people in that room weren't better than her. They weren't smarter or more capable. They had just been lucky enough to get a foot in the door. But Maria had always believed that nothing came easy, that hard work could carry her further than any privilege ever could. The next day, after another long shift at Cielo, Maria decided she would take the first step. She would keep coming to these meetings, even if they made her feel uncomfortable. She would learn, even if she had to force herself to. The weeks that followed were a blur of work and meetings. Each session at the networking group seemed to challenge her more. The more Maria listened to the discussions about tech startups, investment portfolios, and marketing strategies, the more she realized how much she didn't know, and the more she wondered if she could ever catch up. But there was one thing Maria had: a deep-seated determination. She wasn't going to let the fact that she had no degree, no fancy background, and no connections stop her. If she wanted to climb higher, she had to be willing to put herself out there, even if it made her uncomfortable. One afternoon, as she was finishing her shift at the restaurant, Maria received an unexpected call. It was from her cousin, Anna, who had been following her progress since Maria's move to New York. "Maria, I have some news," Anna said. "I know someone at Ford Enterprises, the tech company. They're looking for someone to help with their customer relations department. It's not much, but it's a foot in the door. You should apply." Maria's heart skipped. Ford Enterprises? The name was familiar. It was one of the biggest tech companies in the country, with billions in revenue. Could this be real? "You think I could get the job?" Maria asked, her voice trembling. "I'm sure of it," Anna replied. "Your English is great, you're smart, and they need people who know how to relate to customers. Plus, you've got that kindness. You know how to talk to people, Maria. That's what matters." Maria had never been the type to apply for jobs she didn't feel qualified for, but this felt like a chance, a real opportunity. She couldn't pass it up. That evening after work, she sat down and carefully wrote a cover letter, detailing her experience at Cielo, her work ethic, and the communication skills she had honed over the years. She clicked send, and for the first time in a long while, Maria felt a flicker of hope. This could be her chance to break out of the cycle she had found herself trapped in, to build something more than just a paycheck. The very next day, she received an email requesting an interview. Maria couldn't believe it. She had done it. She was going to interview for a position at Ford Enterprises. The interview day arrived, and Maria stood outside the tall glass building that housed Ford Enterprises. Her heart was racing. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she wasn't going to let nerves take over. She adjusted her simple black dress, the best she could afford, and walked through the glass doors. As soon as she entered the lobby, the sleek, modern decor made her feel small. The receptionist was polite, but the cold, polished environment felt so far removed from the hustle of the restaurant. She was led to a conference room where Evelyn Ford, the CEO of Ford Enterprises, was waiting. Evelyn looked nothing like Maria had imagined. She was a woman of indeterminate age, dressed impeccably in a sharp suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She exuded confidence, authority, and poise. This was the woman who had built an empire, and Maria, a simple waitress, was about to sit across from her. Evelyn smiled when Maria walked in, but there was something sharp in her gaze, as if she were sizing her up. "Maria," she said, her voice warm but with an underlying edge. "Thank you for coming in today." Maria smiled nervously. "Thank you for having me." The interview began with basic questions about Maria's background, her experience, and her skills. But then Evelyn leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she asked, Tell me about the last time you helped someone. What was it like, and how did you feel afterward? Maria paused, thinking back to the elderly woman she had helped outside Cielo, the woman who had changed everything. The woman had told her she was meant for more. Maria remembered how kind her words had been and how it felt to help someone in need. It was more than just a job, it was about something deeper. It was about connecting with people. The last time I helped someone was outside my restaurant, Maria said, her voice steady. I gave a homeless woman some money, but it wasn't just about the money. It was about showing kindness in a world where people often overlook others. It felt right. Evelyn was silent for a moment, her gaze intense. Finally, she nodded. I think you understand something many people don't. We'll be in touch, Maria. Maria couldn't believe what had just happened. The interview at Ford Enterprises had gone better than she could have ever imagined. When Evelyn Ford smiled and told her they'd be in touch, Maria felt the faintest spark of hope. She had given her best answer, spoken from the heart about what mattered most to her, connection, kindness, and making a real impact in people's lives. For the first time in a long while, Maria thought she might have a real chance. But as the days passed, that spark began to fade into the overwhelming reality of what lay ahead. She continued with her routine, waking up early to catch the subway to Cielo, working long shifts, and then coming home exhausted to her apartment. The weight of the uncertainty weighed on her. Despite the promise of the job at Ford Enterprises, there was still that constant fear creeping in. The fear that she wasn't good enough, that she would never make it. The following week, Maria received a call. It wasn't from Evelyn Ford herself, but from someone in human resources at Ford Enterprises. Maria, the voice said, we're pleased to inform you that we've selected you for the position in our customer relations department. Congratulations. Maria's hands shook as she heard the words. It was official. She had gotten the very job she had doubted she could ever land, the job she had dreamed of for months. It was a huge opportunity, one that she knew could change everything. The first thing she did was call her cousin Anna. I got the job, Maria exclaimed, barely able to contain her excitement. I can't believe it, Anna. I really did it. Anna screamed on the other end of the line. I knew you could. Maria, this is it. You're going to make it. For the first time in a long while, Maria allowed herself to bask in the joy of the moment. She had fought so hard, and now her persistence was paying off. But as the days passed, reality began to sink in. The excitement of the new job was tempered by the weight of what would be required of her. The pressure of leaving the familiarity of Cielo, a job that was steady and safe, and stepping into something unknown, something that would demand so much more from her, began to feel overwhelming. Maria's first day at Ford Enterprises was the following Monday. The office was massive, a sleek, modern building that seemed to swallow her whole. She had walked into the lobby, unsure of herself, her nerves getting the best of her. But when she walked into the department, the sight of the well-dressed professionals working in their glass cubicles only made her feel smaller. The polished suits, the unfamiliar buzz of the corporate world, it felt like a world she didn't belong to. The day was filled with training sessions and orientation, where she was introduced to her new colleagues. Her co-workers seemed distant, each one buried in their work, eyes glued to their screens, barely sparing her a glance. She was a small fish in a big pond, and she felt that every moment of it. The most difficult moment of the day came when she had her first meeting with her supervisor, Rachel Monroe. Rachel was a tall, confident woman with sharp features and an air of authority. She had been with Ford Enterprises for over a decade, and Maria couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and intimidation. Rachel was everything Maria wasn't: polished, composed, confident. Maria, Rachel said, flipping through her file as they sat across from each other, I've heard good things about you. You've got the right energy, and that's what we need. This department is all about customer relations. It's important that you understand how to connect with people, how to represent the brand. Maria nodded, trying to look confident. I know you come from a different background. Rachel continued, her gaze sharp. But I'm sure you're eager to prove yourself. Maria felt a nervous chill run through her, but she nodded again. "I'm ready to learn," she said, though her voice faltered slightly. Rachel smiled faintly. "Good. We'll see how you adjust, but I have high expectations. This is a big leap, don't let me down." As Maria left the meeting, the weight of Rachel's words stayed with her. High expectations. Big leap. Don't let me down. Those words echoed in her mind, mixing with the doubt that had been growing in her heart ever since the moment she had walked into Ford Enterprises. She wasn't sure she belonged here. Could she really do this? Could someone like her, a waitress from a small town, really make it in the corporate world? Would they see her as just an outsider? The imposter syndrome crept in harder. Maria began to wonder if she had made a mistake. Maybe she wasn't ready for this. Maybe she had gotten lucky. Maybe the job offer had been some kind of mistake. The next few weeks were a blur of challenges. Maria worked hard to keep up with the demands of her new position, attending long meetings, answering customer queries, and trying to absorb as much as she could from her colleagues. But it wasn't easy. She often felt invisible. Her attempts to fit in met with polite smiles, but no real connection. It was as if no one saw her for who she was, just someone filling a role. Her background, her story, seemed to be an afterthought. Her efforts to stand out were often overshadowed by her coworkers, who seemed more polished, more experienced. And every time she interacted with a customer, her nerves would get the best of her. She stuttered sometimes, stumbled over words, wondering if they saw her as inadequate, just a beginner who didn't deserve to be there. One afternoon, she was working on a complicated client issue when she overheard a conversation at a nearby desk. Two colleagues were talking about her, but they didn't realize she could hear them. "I don't know how long she'll last," one of them said, laughing lightly. "She's so out of place here." Maria felt the sting of their words like a slap across the face. She wanted to respond, to tell them how wrong they were, but instead she stayed silent. Could they see her as an outsider? Was that how they saw her, someone who didn't belong? That evening, Maria sat alone in her apartment, her heart heavy. Her new job, the one she had worked so hard to get, was starting to feel like a trap. She had wanted to break out of her old life, but now she was facing the very same sense of being invisible she had felt her entire life. But just as she was about to give in to the overwhelming doubt, she remembered the woman outside Cielo, the one who had told her, "You have a kind heart. Remember that." Maria closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had come too far to give up now. She would not let the doubts define her. She had been in worse situations before. She had fought for everything she had, and now was no different. She was going to fight for her place in this new world. Maria couldn't shake the feeling that she was losing control. The weight of the expectations, the pressure to prove herself, and the isolation she felt at Ford Enterprises were beginning to feel suffocating. Every day seemed like another battle, one that she wasn't sure she was winning. The tipping point came one Friday afternoon. Rachel Monroe, her supervisor, had asked her to take on an important client case, one that required meticulous attention to detail. It wasn't the first time Maria had been asked to handle something complex, but this was different. The client was one of the most important accounts in the company, and the entire department was depending on her to deliver results. Maria had been working tirelessly for days, balancing this new challenge with her regular duties. She'd been staying late, burning the midnight oil to get everything just right. But despite her efforts, things weren't going according to plan. The client had expressed dissatisfaction with some of the deliverables, and the issue was escalating. Her nerves were frayed, and the self-doubt was starting to creep in again. That afternoon, Maria sat in the conference room, staring at her computer screen. The report was due in an hour, and she knew she wasn't ready. Her mind raced, her thoughts scattered. The voices in her head, the ones that had started to whisper, now screamed, "You're not good enough. You don't belong here. They'll figure out you don't belong. You're just a waitress, remember?" Her hands trembled as she tried to type, but the words wouldn't come. The pressure was unbearable. Suddenly, the door opened. Rachel Monroe stepped inside, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. "Maria," Rachel said, her voice stern. "I need the report. The client's waiting. We can't afford another delay." Maria nodded, but her chest tightened. She wanted to say something, to explain that she was struggling, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she forced a smile. "I'm almost done, Rachel. Just a few more tweaks." Rachel raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Make sure it's perfect, Maria. The stakes are high." As Rachel walked out, the door clicked shut behind her, and the weight of the world felt like it was pressing down on Maria's shoulders. She had been given this opportunity, but now she wasn't sure she could handle it. What if she couldn't deliver? What if she messed up? What if, despite everything, this job wasn't meant for her? The afternoon dragged on. Maria sat in the conference room, staring at the screen, trying to focus. But the more she stared, the more the words blurred together. Her thoughts became a jumbled mess, and all she could think about was how badly she was failing. Finally, she closed her laptop and stood up, gripping the edge of the table as if steadying herself from falling. She had to leave. She couldn't stay in the room another second. The pressure was suffocating. Maria stepped into the elevator, her heart pounding in her chest. She wasn't sure where she was going, but she couldn't be there anymore. As the elevator descended, the world outside the glass windows blurred by the rush of the city. She stepped out into the lobby, and for the first time since starting at Ford Enterprises, she felt a sense of freedom. She didn't have to face the pressure right now. She didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to pretend that she had it all together. But as the elevator doors closed behind her, the feeling didn't last. Instead, a deep, gnawing emptiness filled her chest. The reality of her situation hit her. She was about to lose everything. The job, the opportunity she had fought so hard for, was slipping away. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and Maria pulled it out. It was an email from Rachel Monroe. It wasn't a report. It was a warning. "Maria, I need you to get this client issue under control. If we don't fix this, we'll lose the account. I expect a response in the next hour." Maria read the words over and over. The weight of the message crushed her. What if she couldn't fix this? What if she couldn't live up to the expectations? What if she was just a fraud, someone who had fooled everyone into thinking she belonged? For the next hour, Maria walked aimlessly through the streets of the city. The weight of the decision was overwhelming. Should she just quit? Should she walk away from Ford Enterprises and go back to what she knew, the safety of her job at Cielo? Or should she face her fears, take the risk, and figure it out, even if it meant failing in front of everyone? It felt like she was at a crossroads. Her dreams were either going to come crashing down, or they were going to start becoming a reality. Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from Anna. "Maria, are you okay? You haven't answered your calls." Maria paused. She stared at the message, the screen flickering back at her, waiting for response. Her fingers hovered over the screen, unsure of what to say. She had always been the one to reassure others, to be the strong one. But now, she was the one who needed help, and she didn't know how to ask for it. She typed a response, then quickly deleted it. She couldn't explain what she was feeling. How could she? After a few minutes, Maria found herself standing in front of Cielo, the restaurant where it all started. She hadn't planned on coming here, but she was drawn to the familiarity. The smell of garlic and tomatoes filled the air. The warm lights, the soft chatter of the people inside, the laughter, it all felt so far removed from the cold, polished walls of Ford Enterprises. Maria stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room for something familiar. She spotted Luis, the manager, across the restaurant. He waved at her, and she smiled faintly. It was good to see a friendly face. She hadn't realized how much she missed it until now. Luis walked over, his expression softening when he saw the look on Maria's face. "Tough day?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Maria nodded, her throat tightening. She hadn't meant to come here to talk about work, but it felt like she needed to. "I don't know if I can do it, Luis," she said quietly, her eyes focused on the floor. "I thought I was ready for this new job, but I don't think I belong there. I keep messing up." Luis didn't hesitate. "Maria, I've watched you work for months. I know how hard you try. But it's okay to be scared. It's okay to doubt yourself, sometimes. Just don't let it stop you from moving forward. You've worked too hard for this to quit now. Maria blinked, the tears welling up in her eyes before she could stop them. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that. I don't want to fail, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You won't fail if you don't give up, Luis said firmly. Just take it one step at a time. Maria stood in the small, dimly lit restaurant, the smell of garlic and freshly baked bread still filling the air as she leaned against the counter. Her hands were trembling slightly from the conversation with Luis. It wasn't just the exhaustion from work or the weight of her worries. There was something deeper stirring inside her now. Luis' words had been a revelation. She had spent so much time doubting herself. But somewhere in the back of her mind, a small spark of realization was starting to glow brighter. Maybe she wasn't meant to fail. Maybe the universe hadn't been cruel by bringing her to a place where she felt out of her depth. Maybe it was pushing her toward something bigger. Her heart was pounding, and for the first time in weeks, Maria allowed herself to think beyond just surviving each day. What if this new job, this terrifying, overwhelming position at Ford Enterprises, wasn't meant to break her down? What if it was a chance for her to grow? She had been so focused on the fear of failure that she had forgotten one crucial thing. Failure wasn't the end. It was just a part of the process. If she could fight through the struggles, if she could stop allowing the doubt to rule her, she could prove to herself that she was capable of more than she realized. As Maria left Cielo that evening, she felt a weight lifting off her shoulders. She wasn't going to quit. Not now. Not after everything she had worked for. She had come this far because she was capable, because she had the courage to take the first step into the unknown. She could do this. She would do this. The next morning, as she prepared for another day at Ford Enterprises, Maria looked at herself in the mirror. She had never seen herself this way before. Confident, determined, and ready to take on whatever was ahead. She was more than a waitress. She was more than just the girl from a small town. She was a woman with a purpose. She put on the best outfit she could afford, a simple yet professional dress, and stepped out the door, ready to face the day. She knew she had to make a change, not just in her career, but in how she viewed herself. The workday started just like any other. The buzzing energy of the office, the clicking of keyboards, and the low hum of conversation filled the space as Maria sat at her desk, preparing to dive into her tasks. But today felt different. She wasn't going to let the pressure crush her. She was determined to prove to herself that she belonged here, that she was capable of stepping up. Maria opened the report she had been struggling with for days, the one that had caused so much anxiety the week before, and began to go through it piece by piece. This time, instead of panicking, instead of letting the anxiety cloud her thoughts, she took a deep breath and focused. She took her time, double-checking everything, and for the first time, things started to make sense. By noon, Maria had completed the report. It wasn't perfect. She knew it could be refined, but it was solid, and it was done. She sent it off to Rachel, her supervisor, with a message that was simple but full of newfound confidence. Here is the revised report. Please let me know if you have any questions. Looking forward to your feedback. Maria Alvarez. After hitting send, Maria sat back in her chair, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease for the first time in weeks. She had done it. The afternoon passed uneventfully. Maria answered customer queries, worked on follow-up tasks, and attended a few meetings. But something had changed. She was no longer the nervous, overwhelmed girl she had been when she first started. She was growing into the role, slowly but surely, finding her place within the team. Around 4 p.m., Rachel Monroe came by her desk, a look of curiosity on her face. Maria, she began, her tone more neutral than usual. I got your report. I expected it to be, well, worse, given the time constraints and the issues we were dealing with. But you did a decent job on this. I'm impressed. Keep up the good work. Maria's heart skipped a beat. Impressed? Rachel Monroe was impressed with her work. It was the first real acknowledgement she had gotten since starting. It was a sign that she wasn't invisible, that her efforts were starting to be recognized. "Thank you, Rachel," Maria said, her voice steady. "I appreciate the feedback. I'm working hard to improve." Rachel smiled faintly. "Just keep it up, Maria. You've got potential. Just make sure you keep pushing yourself." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Maria to sit with her thoughts. As the day came to an end, Maria walked out of the office with a lightness she hadn't felt in weeks. She had done something right. For once, she wasn't questioning herself. She wasn't worrying about her place in the company. She knew that she could do this, and she was beginning to feel like she belonged. But as she stepped outside into the busy streets of New York, Maria's phone buzzed again. This time it was from Anna. "Maria, I heard from someone at Ford Enterprises. They said you're doing great. I'm so proud of you. Keep pushing. You've got this." Maria smiled as she read the message. The support from her cousin, the woman who had always believed in her, meant the world. It reminded Maria that she wasn't alone on this journey. She had people in her corner. That evening, as Maria sat on her small apartment balcony overlooking the city, she reflected on the path she had taken. She remembered the elderly woman outside Cielo who had told her she was meant for more, and how at the time she hadn't believed it. But now, the woman's words felt like a prophecy. Maria had stepped into a new life, one that was challenging but filled with endless possibilities. She thought about everything she had overcome, the doubt, the fear, the isolation, and how, even when it seemed impossible, she had found a way forward. She wasn't where she wanted to be yet, but she was on her way. Maria looked out over the vast city, the lights twinkling below like stars. This was just the beginning. The road ahead was still long and uncertain, but she knew now that no matter where it led, she was ready to face it. The following weeks were a whirlwind for Maria. She had proven herself capable at Ford Enterprises, earning Rachel Monroe's praise, and the pressure she had once felt was slowly transforming into a quiet confidence. For the first time, Maria felt like she was beginning to belong. But the world of corporate America wasn't as simple as it seemed, and success came with a set of challenges that Maria wasn't fully prepared for. One morning, as Maria sat in her cubicle, sipping her coffee, she overheard a conversation at the desk next to hers. Two colleagues were talking, and Maria tried to focus on her work, but their words cut through her thoughts like a knife. "I heard that Maria Alvarez is doing well with the client report," said one of them, a woman named Sophie, who worked in a nearby department. "Yeah, well, don't get too excited," replied Derek, a senior analyst who had been with the company for years. "It's just a matter of time before she messes up. I'm not convinced she has the skills for this job. You can tell she's new to this world." Maria froze at the sound of Derek's voice. She hadn't expected the judgment. She had worked so hard to prove herself, to show she was capable, but here they were, her colleagues, the people she had hoped to impress, criticizing her. Her heart sank, and for a moment, all the confidence she had built began to crumble. She could hear their whispers, their subtle criticisms, and it stung deeper than she expected. She had never been the one to let people's opinions affect her. But this was different. This was her job, her future, her chance to build something real, and now she was faced with the cold reality of what others thought of her. That afternoon, Maria walked into Rachel's office for their weekly meeting. Rachel was reviewing a report when Maria knocked on the door. "Come in, Maria," Rachel called, glancing up briefly from her papers. "How's everything going?" Maria sat down, trying to shake off the lingering doubt that had clouded her mind. She forced a smile. "Things are going well, Rachel. I finished the client follow-up report and sent it over to the team. I'm on top of the new tasks as well." Rachel raised an eyebrow and nodded, not quite giving Maria the usual praise. "I see. Good. I'll review it later. Just make sure the next few projects are up to the standard we expect. We can't afford any slip-ups." Maria nodded, though her stomach tightened. Was that it? No acknowledgement of the effort she had put in? Had she really done something wrong? Or was it just the pressure of the job starting to weigh on her? As the days passed, Maria's anxiety grew. She had been doing well, But now it felt like nothing she did was enough. She started to second-guess herself more often. Every meeting, every project, every task felt like it was under a magnifying glass. And the worst part was that she wasn't sure who she could trust. The whispers, the side glances, they were starting to affect her confidence. One evening after work, Maria found herself walking the streets of the city, her mind racing. She was so consumed with the fear of failure that she couldn't see the way forward. She had spent weeks working tirelessly, proving herself to be a capable employee. Yet now, the very thing she had worked for was starting to slip through her fingers. Could she really do this? As she passed a small park near her apartment, Maria spotted the homeless woman from that day outside Cielo. She was sitting on the same bench, looking just as weathered as Maria remembered. But there was something about the way she sat that seemed different this time. The woman's eyes locked onto Maria's, and she smiled, faint but knowing. Maria hesitated, then slowly approached her. The weight of the world felt like it was pressing down on her, but when the woman looked at her, a strange calm washed over Maria. "Are you okay?" the woman asked softly, as if she could see the storm brewing in Maria's heart. Maria took a deep breath, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I don't think I belong where I am. I've worked so hard to get to this point, but now it feels like everyone is just waiting for me to fail." The woman didn't say anything at first. She simply patted the seat beside her. "Come, sit," she said gently. Maria lowered herself onto the bench, the exhaustion of the past few weeks catching up with her. After a long silence, the woman spoke again. "You're worried about what they think, aren't you? The ones who say you don't belong. The ones who wait for you to slip?" Maria nodded, her heart heavy. "Yes, I feel like I'm being watched. Like every mistake I make will prove that I don't deserve to be there." The woman smiled gently, her eyes filled with wisdom that Maria couldn't quite comprehend. "Everyone starts somewhere," she said quietly. "Everyone has doubts, especially when they're doing something that matters. The real question is, what will you do when you feel like you can't go any further? Will you quit? Or will you push through even when it's hard?" Maria thought about the woman's words, feeling them sink in. What was she afraid of? She was afraid of failure, yes, but more than that, she was afraid of being exposed, of being seen as someone who didn't belong. But what if she didn't need to prove herself to anyone but herself? The next day, Maria arrived at work with a newfound sense of resolve. She wasn't going to let the doubt control her anymore. She was going to keep going, even when it felt impossible. She had made it this far, and there was still so much she could achieve if she didn't give up. That afternoon, Rachel Monroe asked to see Maria in her office again. Maria walked in, her heart racing, but this time, she wasn't going to let the fear take over. "I've been reviewing the recent reports," Rachel said, her tone businesslike, "and I've noticed you've really improved. I know this hasn't been easy for you, but you've done well. Keep it up." Maria felt the weight lift from her chest. Rachel was acknowledging her progress, finally, and that acknowledgement felt like a victory. But then Rachel paused and looked at her with a serious expression. "However," she continued, "I've heard some concerns from other departments about your ability to handle the more demanding tasks. You need to be prepared for what's coming. We're expecting more responsibility from you." Maria's heart sank again, but she refused to show the doubt that was threatening to rise within her. She had worked too hard to let this break her now. "I'm ready, Rachel," she said, her voice steady. "I'll handle whatever comes next." Maria sat in her cubicle, staring at her computer screen, her fingers frozen over the keyboard. It had been months since she joined Ford Enterprises, and while she had improved and found herself adapting to the fast-paced corporate environment, there was still an undercurrent of uncertainty gnawing at her. Despite the constant pressure and the endless work, Maria was starting to see the results. Rachel Monroe's acknowledgement that she had improved felt like a turning point, but Maria wasn't done yet. She needed to prove to herself that she belonged here, that she could handle what was coming next. And now, it seemed, that moment was approaching faster than she expected. It all started with the email from Rachel Monroe. The subject line read, "New opportunity for growth. team leader position available. Maria's heart skipped a beat as she opened it. Rachel had been impressed with Maria's recent work, and she wanted to offer her an opportunity to lead a new project team. It was a big step up, one that would require Maria to handle more responsibility, coordinate with various departments, and manage a client that had been notoriously difficult to satisfy. Maria stared at the screen for several minutes, her mind racing. Was she ready for this? It wasn't just the job itself, it was the weight of the expectations that came with it. This was her chance to prove to herself, to Rachel, to the entire company that she was capable of more than just following orders. This was the moment she had been working for, but it also came with a terrifying fear of failure. After a long pause, Maria finally responded, typing the words she had been thinking, but was unsure if she could say, "I'm ready for the challenge. Thank you for the opportunity." She hit send, immediately feeling a rush of adrenaline followed by a wave of doubt. Could she really handle this responsibility? Would she live up to the expectations, or would she fail? The following week was a blur of meetings, planning sessions, and frantic phone calls. Maria was officially the team leader for the new project, and while it was exciting, it was also a whirlwind of pressure. She had never been in charge of anything this important before. Everything was riding on her ability to manage the team and deliver results. As the days went by, Maria poured every ounce of energy she had into making sure the project was successful. She worked late, coordinated with her team, and took on every task with the dedication that had gotten her to this point. But the weight of the responsibility was immense, and it felt like no matter how hard she worked, she couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was watching her, waiting for her to slip up. There were moments when Maria doubted herself. She had always been the one who felt like an outsider, the one who didn't belong in the rooms full of confident professionals. But now, as she led meetings and made decisions that affected the course of the project, she began to realize something. She was capable. She had been so focused on what she couldn't do that she had overlooked the strength and skills she had developed. Then came the day when the project team received the approval they had been waiting for. The client had signed off on the deliverables. It was a huge win for the team, and it was a moment of validation for Maria. She had done it. She had led her team through the challenges and come out on top. That afternoon, Rachel Monroe called her into her office. Maria's nerves were on edge as she walked through the door, unsure of what to expect. But Rachel's smile was warm as she motioned for Maria to sit. "I just wanted to say how impressed I am, Maria," Rachel said, her voice filled with genuine admiration. "You handled the project with grace, professionalism, and determination. The team and the client are thrilled with the results, and I can see that you're really growing into this role." Maria blinked, surprised by how sincere Rachel's words felt. She had always been tough on Maria, often pushing her harder than she expected. But now, she was seeing a different side of Rachel, one that recognized Maria's efforts. "Thank you, Rachel," Maria replied, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. It was a team effort, and I couldn't have done it without their support. But I'm proud of what we accomplished. Rachel nodded. "You should be. This project was a huge deal, and you stepped up in a way that really exceeded expectations. You've earned your place here, Maria." Maria couldn't help the smile that spread across her face. It was a small victory, but it was hers. She had done it. Over the next few weeks, Maria's confidence continued to grow. The feedback from Rachel, her team, and even the client gave her the reassurance she had been missing for so long. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She wasn't just a girl from a small town trying to make it in the corporate world. She had become a leader. Her colleagues, who had once whispered about her behind closed doors, were now starting to recognize her for her strengths. They began to respect her, not just for the work she was doing, but for the person she had become. But even with this newfound sense of achievement, Maria couldn't help but notice something. Rachel's attitude towards her had shifted. The praise she had received for her work felt genuine, but there was something else, something Maria hadn't quite put her finger on. Rachel seemed to be pushing her harder giving her more high-stakes tasks, more responsibility, and more expectations. One day, as Maria sat at her desk, working on a report for an upcoming client presentation, she overheard a conversation between Rachel and another senior manager. "You know, Maria has been doing great," Rachel said, her voice louder than usual. "But I think we're going to have to start testing her limits. She's ready for more challenges, and I don't want to hold her back." The senior manager nodded. "I agree, but be careful. She's been doing well so far, but she could burn out if we push her too hard. Keep an eye on her, okay?" Rachel's response was firm. "I know what I'm doing. She's capable of handling it. Let's see what she's made of." Maria froze. Rachel had always believed in her. But now, it felt like she was being pushed into a corner where failure wasn't an option. The stakes were higher now, and she could feel the pressure intensifying. That evening, as Maria walked home, the weight of Rachel's words settled on her. She had succeeded so far, but at what cost? Was she really prepared to keep pushing herself, to keep working at this pace? The last few months had been a whirlwind, and she had barely had time to breathe, let alone think about what she truly wanted. Maria arrived at her apartment, sitting down at her small kitchen table, staring out the window at the bustling city below. She had done it. She had earned the recognition she had longed for. But now she wondered if this was the path she truly wanted to be on. Was she ready for even more pressure? Was this success worth the cost of her peace of mind? The questions lingered in her mind, but there was one thing Maria knew for certain: she was no longer the woman who doubted herself. She had made it this far, and she had proven to herself that she was capable of more than she had ever dreamed. Maria stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of her office, staring out at the sprawling skyline of New York City. The view from her desk had become something she never imagined would be hers. She had fought for every inch of this space, every small victory. The same city that had once felt like an intimidating, impossible place had become her home, her proving ground. And now, as she gazed out over the horizon, she could finally appreciate just how far she had come. But the pressure of success wasn't something she had fully understood until recently. After weeks of intense work and rapid progress, the company's expectations were reaching new heights. More projects, more responsibility, more visibility. Maria was no longer just another employee at Ford Enterprises. She had earned the trust of her superiors, but it came at a price. As the days passed, Maria found herself sinking deeper into the cycle of high stakes, constantly striving to meet the rising demands. There were moments when she wondered whether she had sacrificed too much. She had learned so much about herself, about her resilience, her capabilities, and her leadership potential. But the personal cost was becoming more apparent. The late nights at the office, the stress of constant deadlines, and the weight of leading projects were starting to take a toll on her mental and physical well-being. One evening, after a particularly intense week of meetings and deadlines, Maria found herself alone in her office, staring blankly at the screen. She had just finished drafting a proposal for a new project and was about to send it off to Rachel when her phone buzzed. It was a message from Anna, her cousin. "How are you doing, Maria? Haven't heard from you in a while. I know you've been working hard, but don't forget to take care of yourself. I'm proud of you, but make sure you're not losing yourself in the process." Maria's heart tightened as she read Anna's words. She hadn't realized how much she'd been neglecting her own well-being. It was easy to get caught up in the whirlwind of success, but what good was success if it came at the cost of her happiness? She sat back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment. The long hours, the constant pressure, had made her lose sight of why she had come to New York in the first place. It had never been just about climbing the corporate ladder. It had been about finding her own voice, creating space for herself in a world that often made her feel small. And yet, despite all her success, she couldn't help but feel isolated. She had distanced herself from her family, her friends, and even from her roots. Her dream had always been about giving her family a better life, but she had never stopped to consider whether she was still connected to her own joy. The next morning, Maria decided to take a step back. She called in sick and spent the day at home. She needed to recharge, physically, mentally, and emotionally. She needed to reconnect with herself. That afternoon, Maria found herself walking through Central Park, the quiet greenery a stark contrast to the noise and chaos of the office. The trees, the flowers, the sound of children laughing in the distance. It all brought her a sense of calm that she hadn't felt in a long time. As she walked along the path, she realized how far she had come in the years since she first stepped off the bus from Mexico, full of uncertainty and hope. She was no longer just surviving. She had built something from the ground up, a career, a life, a purpose. But now she realized she needed to start thinking about what that purpose truly meant for her. It wasn't just about success or proving herself to others anymore. It was about finding balance, about being true to who she was and what she wanted. Maria had been so focused on the future that she had neglected the present. She couldn't continue sacrificing herself for success. She needed to live her life on her own terms. Later that evening, Maria sat down at her small apartment table and opened her phone. She scrolled through the messages from her family, from her friends, and from the people who had always believed in her. The words on the screen reminded her of something important. She wasn't alone in this journey. She had support, people who loved her and wanted the best for her. She quickly dialed Anna's number. "Hey, Maria, how are you?" Anna answered with her usual cheerfulness. "I'm good," Maria replied, her voice sounding lighter than it had in days. "I just needed to talk to you." Anna's voice softened. "Of course. What's going on?" Maria paused for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's been happening lately. About the job, about how I've been pushing myself, and about what I really want." Anna was silent for a moment before responding. "Maria, you've worked so hard. You deserve everything that's coming your way, but don't forget to take care of yourself. It's okay to slow down." Maria smiled, feeling a sense of relief. This was what she had needed to hear. "Thank you, Anna," Maria said quietly. "I think I've been so focused on proving myself that I forgot to enjoy the journey. I've been living in the future instead of appreciating what I've already accomplished." As she hung up, Maria felt a renewed sense of purpose. She didn't need to prove herself to anyone. The journey was about her, about finding balance, and about embracing who she was, not just the leader in the office, but the woman who had dreams, who had family, and who needed to take care of herself just as much as she took care of her career. The next day, Maria went back to the office with a new perspective. She wasn't going to let the pressure overwhelm her anymore. She was still going to give her best, but she was also going to prioritize her well-being, her happiness, and the connections that truly mattered. As the weeks passed, Maria's approach began to shift. She found ways to delegate more tasks, taking some of the weight off her shoulders. She started spending more time with her colleagues, building relationships instead of focusing solely on results. She even made time to visit her family in Mexico, reconnecting with her roots, and remembering the reason she had come to New York in the first place. By the time the next big project came along, Maria was ready. She had found her balance, and it made all the difference. She led her team with clarity, confidence, and care. The results were stellar, and once again, Rachel Monroe acknowledged Maria's exceptional leadership. But this time, Maria didn't feel the pressure to live up to some ideal of perfection. She had found a new definition of success, one that wasn't just about achievements, but about the way she lived her life. One evening, as Maria stood at her window, looking out at the city below, she felt a deep sense of peace. She had built something that mattered, not just for her career, but for her own happiness and the relationships that sustained her. The city still felt as big as ever, but now Maria understood that the journey was just as important as the destination. And as she looked out at the lights below, Maria realized that the future was no longer something to fear. It was something to embrace with both hands. Maria had always dreamed of making a difference. She came to New York with the hopes of finding something more than just a job. She wanted to build a future for herself and to show the world that a girl from a small village in Mexico could achieve anything. But even as her life had transformed over the last year, she had never realized the true impact of her journey. It wasn't just her life that was changing, it was the lives of those around her, the people she interacted with, and even the company she worked for. It started subtly. Maria had earned the respect of her colleagues at Ford Enterprises, but it wasn't just her work ethic or her ability to lead projects that people were talking about. It was the way she made people feel. Her kindness, the same quality that had been ingrained in her since childhood, was becoming her most powerful asset in the corporate world. People were beginning to notice the power of authenticity in a place where so many were just trying to keep up appearances. Maria wasn't just another professional in a suit. She was someone who cared, someone who believed in helping others succeed just as much as she believed in her own success. One afternoon, as Maria walked down the hall toward her office, she was stopped by Sophie, one of the colleagues who had once been skeptical of her abilities. "Maria, do you have a moment?" Sophie asked, her voice a little hesitant, but warmer than it had been in the past. "Of course," Maria replied, a little surprised. "What's up?" Sophie smiled, her expression softening. "I just wanted to thank you," she said, her voice quiet. "I've been watching how you manage the team. How you bring people together, how you lead with humility. I've been here longer than you, and I thought I had everything figured out. But you've taught me something. I think I've been too focused on results, too focused on myself. You're showing me what it really means to empower others." Maria blinked, taken aback. Sophie was someone who had once dismissed her efforts, who had looked down on her for not having the polished corporate background. But now, Sophie was acknowledging something deeper than just her performance. She was recognizing the kind of leader Maria had become. Maria smiled warmly. "Thank you, Sophie. That means a lot to me. I think we all have a lot to learn from each other." Sophie nodded, a hint of admiration in her eyes. "I'm serious, Maria. You're changing the way we work here. I think you're starting a new kind of leadership that we didn't even know we needed." This conversation marked a turning point for Maria. She had always believed in leadership through service, but seeing others begin to recognize it in her, to understand that her approach wasn't just effective but also transformational, was humbling. Her journey was no longer about just proving herself. It was about creating something that would continue to grow and inspire. As the weeks went by, Maria's influence spread, not just through the walls of Ford Enterprises but also beyond. She started being invited to speak at corporate conferences and leadership seminars where people were eager to hear her story. They wanted to understand how she had risen from humble beginnings to become a high-ranking team leader at one of the most prestigious companies in the country. But Maria didn't focus on her own success. Instead, she talked about the importance of being authentic, of embracing vulnerability, and of using leadership as a means to elevate others. She told stories about the challenges she had faced, how she had struggled with self-doubt, and how she had learned to silence the negative voices that told her she wasn't enough. Her authenticity resonated with everyone in the room. She wasn't just sharing her achievements, she was sharing her human experience, and that's what made her message powerful. One evening, after a particularly exhausting week, Maria was sitting at home, going through emails when she saw a message from Evelyn Ford, the CEO of Ford Enterprises, the woman who had hired her, the woman who had believed in her when no one else did. "Maria, I wanted to personally congratulate you on everything you've accomplished so far. You've become an example for everyone at Ford Enterprises, and I've noticed the positive impact you've had on your team and beyond. You've exceeded my expectations, and I'm proud to have you in our company. Keep leading the way." Maria read the email several times. Evelyn had always been a figure of authority and power, but reading this message made Maria realize just how far she had come. She wasn't just the girl who had started as an outsider. She had become someone whose presence and leadership were being recognized by those at the very top. Days later, Maria was walking through the company's headquarters when she saw a familiar face approaching, Rachel Monroe. "Maria, I need to talk to you," Rachel said, her tone serious yet warm. "I've been meaning to say this for a while. You've become one of the most influential people in this company. Your leadership style, your ability to connect with others, it's remarkable. Maria's eyes widened. Rachel was someone she had always looked up to, and hearing her praise meant more than she could express. Thank you, Rachel. That really means a lot. I'm just doing my best. Rachel smiled. Your best has been more than enough. We need leaders like you. And not just at Ford Enterprises. You're changing the corporate world as we know it. Your approach is something people are starting to take notice of. Maria felt a wave of gratitude, but she didn't know what to say. She had worked hard for this moment, but hearing Rachel speak those words made her realize that she had truly made an impact. That afternoon, as Maria sat at her desk, her phone buzzed with a message from Anna. Maria, I just saw your interview on TV. You're everywhere now. I'm so proud of you. You've always had it in you. Maria smiled, looking at the message. She hadn't realized just how far her influence had reached. She had gone from a small-town girl with a dream to someone who was being recognized not just for her achievements, but for her values, her kindness, her leadership, her authenticity. She was changing lives, not just her own, but the lives of others who saw her as a beacon of possibility. That evening, as she sat in her apartment, Maria reflected on everything that had led her to this point. She thought back to the days when she had doubted herself, when she had felt invisible, unsure if she would ever find her place. She had come so far. Maria knew she still had much to learn, much to grow, but she had also learned one very important thing. Success wasn't just about what she achieved, it was about the impact she had on others. As she looked out the window at the city lights below, Maria understood something that had eluded her for so long. She wasn't just a product of her circumstances. She had become the change she had always hoped to see in the world. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon, the sun gently casting its light over the city as Maria sat in her small apartment, looking out at the skyline. The New York City skyline, the one that had once seemed so overwhelming to her, now felt like a familiar backdrop, a part of her journey, a part of the life she had built. Her life had come full circle. Maria had gone from a young girl with a dream to a respected leader in one of the most prestigious companies in the country. The last few years had been filled with challenges, moments of doubt, and periods of intense pressure, but in the end, Maria had proven something to herself and to the world that she was more than capable. Yet, in this quiet moment as she reflected on her journey, she realized something that was deeper than any professional success. Her journey had never been about climbing the corporate ladder or proving herself to anyone else. It had always been about finding her place in the world and learning to live authentically. A knock at the door interrupted Maria's thoughts. She stood up and walked over to answer it, a smile crossing her face when she saw Anna, her cousin, standing on the other side. Anna! Maria exclaimed, pulling her into a warm hug. What are you doing here? I couldn't stay away any longer, Anna said, grinning. I've been following your journey, and I'm so proud of you. I wanted to come and see you. You've come so far, Maria. Maria felt a warmth spread through her chest as she pulled Anna inside. I've been doing my best, Maria said softly, looking around at the small but cozy apartment she had created for herself. But it hasn't always been easy. I know, Anna replied, her voice filled with understanding. I know it's been hard, but look at everything you've accomplished. You've built something for yourself. You've inspired so many people, especially me. You've shown me that hard work, kindness, and authenticity will always win in the end. Maria's eyes welled up with emotion as she heard her cousin's words. The journey had been long, and there had been moments when Maria wasn't sure she could go on. But now, looking at Anna, she realized that she had made it, not just for herself, but for everyone who had believed in her, especially her family back home. As the afternoon wore on, Anna and Maria sat in the living room, chatting about old memories and the changes in their lives. The conversation eventually shifted to Maria's accomplishments, and Anna's voice became serious. You know, Maria, Anna said thoughtfully, I don't think you realize how much you've changed not just yourself, but the people around you. Your story is more than just your success. It's about the people you've helped along the way. Maria blinked, taken aback. What do you mean? I mean, Anna continued, I've seen how people look up to you, your colleagues, your friends, even strangers who hear your story. You've shown them that it's possible to succeed, not by fitting into the mold they expect, but by being authentically yourself. You didn't just climb the corporate ladder. You broke the mold and created your own path. And that's something special. Maria paused, letting Anna's words sink in. She had always thought of success in terms of titles, promotions, and accolades, but she was beginning to understand that true success was about something much deeper. It was about making an impact, about changing people's lives in ways she hadn't fully realized. It wasn't just about being recognized, it was about leaving a legacy of kindness, authenticity, and leadership. The next day, Maria received a message from Evelyn Ford, the CEO of Ford Enterprises, who had been watching Maria's progress over the years. The email was brief, but the words were powerful. Maria, I wanted to personally congratulate you on everything you've accomplished. You've become a leader not just in our company, but in your own right. Your ability to lead with authenticity, your commitment to empowering others, and your unwavering integrity have been a beacon for so many. I'm proud to have you on this team, and I look forward to seeing the legacy you will continue to build. You've made a lasting impact. Maria stared at the email for a moment, the weight of Evelyn's words hitting her like a wave. She had come so far, and this was the recognition she had always hoped for, but it felt different now. It wasn't just the title or the accomplishments, it was the deeper impact she had made, the way she had changed the company, the people around her, and herself. Later that evening, Maria went for a walk in Central Park, the same place she had wandered through when everything felt uncertain. The city was alive, the lights twinkling in the distance, but this time, Maria walked with a sense of peace. She found a bench and sat down, staring out at the park. Her mind drifted to her roots, to the small village in Mexico where she had once dreamed of a life that felt so out of reach. She had worked tirelessly to get here, but now she understood that success wasn't just about the external rewards, it was about the inner transformation. As the wind gently blew through the trees, Maria's phone buzzed with a message. It was from Rachel Monroe, her mentor, the person who had pushed her to be better, to grow, and to face her fears. Maria, the message read, I want to offer you a position in a new leadership initiative we're launching at Ford Enterprises. You've proven yourself time and again, and now we need someone like you to lead this. Let me know your thoughts. Maria stared at the message, her heart swelling with pride. This was the opportunity she had dreamed of, but for the first time, she didn't feel overwhelmed. She felt ready. She quickly typed a response. Thank you, Rachel. I'm ready. Let's do this. Months later, Maria stood in front of a room full of executives, colleagues, and clients. She had just completed a successful presentation on a new initiative she had spearheaded for Ford Enterprises, one that was focused on diversity, leadership, and personal growth. The room erupted in applause, and Maria stood tall, her heart racing with excitement and gratitude. As she looked around the room, she realized something. She had created a space for herself in a world that once seemed so inaccessible. But it wasn't just about breaking into the corporate world. It was about using that space to make it better, to help others who, like her, had once felt like outsiders. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Evelyn Ford. Maria, your work is exceptional. I knew from the first moment I met you that you were destined for greatness. You've created a legacy, and I'm honored to have you here. Maria smiled softly, the weight of those words washing over her. This was the legacy she had always hoped to leave, a legacy of leadership, compassion, and authenticity. And as she looked out at the future ahead, she knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning.